Okay, we're back. Don't have a mow today. Instead, we're going to be doing some mower maintenance. Now, we've had a few people in our comments requesting mower maintenance videos specifically. So today we're going to do a overhaul maintenance on this mower and get it up to standard again. She's been falling apart a bit and we've been nursing her along, but it's really time. It needs some work. So we're going to get stuck into it today, get it all ready to go so that it'll last the rest of the season. Okay, this is Ghibli Mowing. Let's get into it. Alright, now I've had a few people request that I talk over these videos and actually give a bit of description of what's going on. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown. This mower's been falling apart for a while. It hasn't been as well maintained as I'd like to think. I keep most of my machines pretty well maintained, but this one's been lagging. So the exhaust kept falling off as the bolts weren't staying in. And silly me decided to tighten it while it was hot one day and pulled the threads right out of the exhaust. So as you might have noticed from our last couple of videos, the mower has been quite loud. Anyway, the other day we'd been jerry-rigging it just to get us by while we were at customers' houses, so it wasn't loud at customer houses, just on these filmed mows. And, well, I was doing the last of the mow on the day before I did this maintenance. And just like a Benny Hill song, the exhaust fell off. And seconds later, so did one of the wheels. And the push bar behind the mower fell off too, all within seconds of each other. So it really occurred to me at that moment, yeah, I've got to stop using this machine, do some maintenance, and then get back to it. So now, as you can see, I've drained the oil, which is why it's on its side here, and I've pulled out the air filter. As you can see with the one that I'm sticking back in, I've greased up the underside of it. So this is a brand new air filter. The old one went in the bin. We've cleaned it out as much as possible. It's not lasting anymore. It's got to go. But as you can see, the new one, I put a bit of grease underneath it. That prevents dust from getting under the filter and getting into the intake. These filters are pretty good at stopping dust from getting through, but just where they seal around the plastic, if you don't grease them up, they'll tend to let a bit of dust through, and that can cause a large amount of wear on the inside of the engine. So the oil's all out. The air filter's been replaced, and now we're going to start to pull these wheels off and get the new ones done. Now, I kind of messed up here. I was supposed to buy 4 new wheels, front and rear. Instead, I bought 2 rear wheels and 2 more rear wheels. So what you can see here is me salvaging some low-life bearings from another set of wheels that I've got. So instead of replacing the wheels, I'm just replacing the bearings on the front ones. And I'm going to return the wheels that I got and get the right ones before I fix that up. So as you can see, I'm knocking in the washer that holds the wheel on. And you'll see me with this one. As you can see, the wheel's on a fair angle there. That was the one that actually popped off entirely. Those bearings are shot. There's nothing left of them. They are absolutely gone. So working the bearings loose, pop them out, salvage the bearings from the black ones. The black ones have got exactly the same bearings, they just haven't been used. So they're a bit dusty because they've been sitting on the shelf, so I'll just give them a bit of a clean up and whack them in and throw them back on the mower. There we go. And all I'm doing is just tapping that locking nut on. It's really just a washer with some teeth on it. So it's not hard, as long as you put it on evenly. Alright, as you can see, I'm removing the spark plug here out of the front of the engine, and I'm going to replace the spark plug. Now, you'll notice that the spark lead, which is sitting above it, gets left off. You'll also notice here I've bought the wrong plug, so I'm going looking for plugs. I actually end up finding one in the car. As you can see, I'm just comparing part numbers to make sure I understand what I'm looking for. That way I make sure I get the right one. And that obviously wasn't the right one, but I do find the right one out in the car. And you'll notice that I've got a little bit of silver stuff there. That's just some anti-seize to prevent the spark plugs locking up. Also prevents us damaging the threads. So wind it in by hand to make sure that it doesn't bind up. And you only want to nip up spark plugs. They do not need to be tight. The washer under them compresses and holds in the gases. You do not need them to be tight. They just need to be nipped up. Okay. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff under there. So you'll notice around the drive at the back that it's all clogged with garbage that's just wrapped around it. So we're going to rip off this, for lack of a better term, it's a flywheel. It's really just a disc that the blades sit on. It's also the weight behind the engine between strokes. It gives it a bit of balance and keeps it moving. Excuse me. Now you'll notice I'm removing all of the blades here. I'm just going to toss them. They do have a little bit of life left in them, but it's not worth me putting them back on because they're only going to last another fortnight before they'll need to be replaced anyway. So just a new set. As you can see, I'm scraping all of the crap that gets clogged up underneath the wheel. Most of that's just heavy dust that's gotten trapped there, and a little bit of water from mowing in the mornings and moisture from the grass. They'll sort of set like concrete, so you've got to get it all off. Now, you'll notice that I'm not replacing the hardware on this one. Usually I do, as the blades normally come with hardware. But I only bought the blades online this time, so it didn't come with hardware, so we're just reusing the hardware. There's no issue in that, especially considering this flywheel needs replacing anyway. Not that you can see it from the camera, but the where the bolts go through on the flywheel is a bit of a square shape to prevent the bolts from spinning when you tighten and loosen them. Now you see I put a bit of ACF 50 on them. That's really just to lube them up and prevent them seizing. It's nothing special. It's not even designed for what I'm using it for. It's just what I've been using it for here. Now, you always, after putting a new set of blades on, want to go through and make sure your blades can move. Now, you can see it's all been blurred out because the blade didn't want to move, and then when it did, it took a bit of my finger with it. So, careful with these sorts of things. You do want to be careful. New set of blades, even though it wasn't moving, it very easily cuts. They don't have a sharp edge, they're square, but that doesn't mean that they won't cut. So always be careful when you're working with your tools. Now, as you can see, there's stuff that's all wrapped around this drive shaft here. This is the part where they call it self-propelled, so you hit a little clutch on the handlebars and those rear wheels drive from the engine, so they push the mower for you. I use it a lot, and it really helps me get through the day without wasting too much energy. Now, again, just fitting the flywheel, making sure it's nice and tight, but not over-torquing it so I don't strip any threads. Checking all the blades again, and that's good. So I'll give the desk a bit of a clean up and move on to the rest of the equipment. Okay, now, I've got to fix the exhaust. So I've got to get the Dremel out and do some tinkering. Now, when I pulled these threads out, I actually did damage where the threads go. And I don't have a helicoil kit, which is where you drill it out and you throw in new threads. So we're going to just Dremel out the backside of the exhaust flange. The part that I'm Dremeling out isn't actually supporting the exhaust flange. The exhaust flange is supported in other places. I'm just Dremeling out some of the cooling fins. That way the nuts can fit behind there. Now, I did want some castle nuts, which are the type of nuts you can use to put a split pin through, which prevents the nut and washer from undoing. But I couldn't find any of them, so we're just using two nuts at this stage, one behind the other, as a type of locking. So you do one nut up, then you do the second one up, and you do them in opposite directions, and they'll lock together. So, as you can see, I'm Dremeling it out. Be careful if you're going to do this sort of thing to your equipment. You really do need to know what you're doing before you do it. I was able to get the right bolts and size it up and make sure that everything fit properly. Really, all I'm doing is making sure there's a nice flat surface for the nut to seat on, and that there's enough clearance that the nut can get over the bolt and not cross-thread. The one at the bottom's quite easy. There was already plenty of room. All I was doing was making a flat surface. The one at the top was a bit more difficult. The one at the top, the bolt actually went into the back of the exhaust, so I actually had to Dremel out all of where the bolt finished just to get that nut in there. As you can see, it took me a few attempts to get it right. These sort of things do take time, but better that I do it right and not have to worry about this exhaust coming off again, because it's incredibly loud. In fact, I can't start too early in the morning without the exhaust on because I do exceed the noise limits. So it's better that I do it right. Really, I should be wearing gloves for what I'm doing, but I at least have the protective eye equipment. I should also be using a bench vise instead of holding it with my hands, but do forgive that. Now, when you're using that kind of a disc on a Dremel, always make sure that you're not lined up with the disc. That the disc is cutting at an angle where if the disc comes apart, it won't go anywhere near your face or body. So, yes, it might come apart and hit your arms and your hands and whatnot, but don't ever have it flat on where you're looking along the disc, because if it comes apart, it's going to come at you. You don't want that. Okay, as you can see here, I've put the nut in at the top. It's lined up. Nice and tight. And I'm just deburring the bolt so it doesn't damage any of the threads on the nut. There we go. It's a little bit difficult. Now, after I've got this nut in, I do try to drill through the nut. I can drill through the bolt, but I can't drill through that nut. So I'll just have to wait till that castle nut gets here. We've ordered a set, so they're a special type of nut that looks like a castle in a chess piece, or a rook, or whatever you'd call it, that sit at the end of the chessboard, with little notches out of the top, which allow you to stick a split pin through the bolt. So we'll have to wait for them to arrive. And you can see me swapping out drill bits here, trying to get one that'll drill through it. I'm afraid it was just too... It's a high temperature nut, so it's not gonna it's not gonna let me drill through it. I do try a couple of different drill bits. Someone's designed for steel and stuff like that, but it's not happening. I actually melted the tip on 2 of them. You can see me get a little bit frustrated with it. That happens. Alright, now just locking off this bottom one. Like I said, there's 2 nuts there. So the first one you do up nice and tight, and the second one you prevent the bolt from spinning and tighten it down on top of the other nut. Now, I don't know if you noticed earlier, I had a bit of cloth jammed in the exhaust port when I was doing all of that. And I also have a can of air on the side there that I used to squirt it all down. So no metal got into the exhaust or the port after I was finished dremeling and drilling and cutting and stuff. I'm doing the same here, as you can see. Doing a little bit more dremeling, so I've shoved a bit of cloth in there. Now, I'm just cleaning up the work I did before. I'd already done all the dremeling, and this is just me cleaning it up a bit, making it look a bit neater. As you can see, I'm just using some of the ACF 50 as a lubricant so that the tool that I'm using doesn't overheat. And that's it for the dremeling. You'll also notice in the beginning when I turned it over to work on the blades, I had pulled the spark plug lead out. That way that if I did turn the blades, there was no way that engine would start. If you're going to work on the blades on your mower, always pop that spark lead off and make sure it's not sitting on the spark plug in any way. It's safer. I mean, yeah, the chances of you turning it and it unintentionally firing is very, very low. But you're better safe than sorry. Alright, now we're going to get some oil into it. It doesn't take much to fill this thing, but it's very slow to fill. So, to speed that up, what I do is I just turn the engine over a few times. You notice the spark plug's off because I don't actually want it starting when I turn it over. Now I want it starting. And there it goes. Now, I just do this a few times to make sure that I'm getting the oil all the way through the engine before I measure how much oil's in there. Because like I said, it's just a little slow to fill. Now, yeah, I'm not actually running it for any particular length of time. I'm just running it over, just to make sure that the oil moves around the engine. That's all it needs. It doesn't need to run for any particular length of time. And there we go. We've got the right amount of oil on it. That's just me checking inside the fuel tank. The fuel tank's dirty and I do need to pull it off and clean it, but for now it's going to survive, so we'll leave it. We'll leave it until we're going to do a carby clean, and then the fuel tank will come off with the carby. Alright. Now, the cords that come out from that drive unit, it got chewed up a while back. I think they actually got tangled up in the ride-on when I was driving past it, and they got chewed up badly. So you'll see in a moment, I'm going to try and undo it in situ without pulling the brackets that hold that cable in place off. It doesn't work. I got to pull the brackets off. I thought I'd cheat it. I couldn't cheat it. I didn't have the right tools. So I'll pull the bracket off in a moment, pull the cord out, and do it that way. Should have done that way in the first place. It was faster, but I thought I could get around it and cheat. So yeah, not going to happen. So yeah, pull the bracket off. Doesn't take very long. Should have done it that way in the first place. I apologise for the lighting. We have run out of daylight here. So we're using the garage lighting. Like I said, this happened last customer of the day sort of thing. So I wanted to make sure I got it done before the next day. Now, I have got the bracket off, but it's got a split pin holding the cable onto the drive selector. So it just takes me a little while to get that split pin out properly. And once I've got that split pin out, it slides right out. There it is. So if you can look off to the left, just in front of the wheel there, you'll see where it got chewed up, where it's just bent at a bit of a funny angle. Yeah. Prevented us from selecting the gears. So we were stuck in high speed the whole time. Not that that's much of an issue for us, except that it does burn through the wheels a bit. And, well, causes us to have to maintain the mower a bit more than we'd like. So the new cable will allow us to select the speeds that we want, rather than just having to drive full tilt all the time. Alright, so we're just mounting that bracket back on. Getting that pin back in, make sure it sits nicely, make sure it's straight. Takes me a little bit to get this pin in, but once it's in, everything sits squarely, so I can go ahead and tighten it all back up. Sorry that you can't really see in here. Felt like a bit of a surgeon having to work with long tools and not actually being able to fit my hands and the tools in there at the same time. So, yeah, not much room for the camera to see in there either. That's just me shaking it, just to make sure it's not going anywhere. Very good. Alright, now this is the arm end, so this is up where we push it from. So I'm going to pull this end off, and it takes a little bit to crack it off, but once it's open, it's easy. So crack the nuts, slide out the old cable, put in the new one, and when we're done here, we'll actually tighten it all up along the arm. That way we don't have it getting chewed up again, hopefully. Yeah, got another split pin holding this one in. There we are. Old cable's gone. New one in. These are actually quite nice. They're not the normal cables on your standard home mowers, like your push mower cables. They're actually designed really well. They actually slide quite easily. You could actually move them by hand. But these levers just make it a nice smooth action when you're working. Now, as you can see, we've got two levers there. The one closest to the camera was your throttle, and the yellow one is your speed. We've also got that big lever right at the back where my elbow is. That's actually your wheel clutch. Now, some mowers have one of those on each side of the handlebars. One for your wheel clutch, one for your blades, so you can shut your blades on and off. We don't actually have a clutch for the blades in this, it's just straight driven, which is fine, I don't mind that. It'd be nice to have it. It means I wouldn't have to shut it down if I'm driving over something I'm worried about chewing up, but I don't mind shutting it down and then firing it back up a second later. Now you can see here I'm putting a new bolt through the housing there. I'm going to take the old one out as well, clean in behind it. I'm just sizing up what's there. And I'm going to replace both of them actually. Put new lock nuts on them so that they're nice and secure and don't move around. That bracket actually comes under a lot of tension when you're pushing these mowers around, especially if you're lifting the front wheels off the ground. There's a lot of torsion on that section of the bracket. And again, all I'm doing is just cutting them down to size. And then cleaning up the ends of the bolts so the threads are nice and clean. I'm just checking that it clears and that it doesn't actually hit on the bolt when I change the height of the mower. And of course it did, so we turned them around. Made them face inwards. Now, that bar I've just put through there, that was the old bar that, the old thread that held the bar on. It got damaged. It's non-recoverable, so we went and got a new booker rod and replaced it. So as you can see here, I've put a lock nut washer on one end, and I'm just bending up some washers to the right shape to act as a locating washer. There we are. They're just hand screwed thread. So those black handles are similar to the ones you have on your home mower. They'll allow us to tighten and loosen the bolts holding the bar upright in place so that we can lift the bar and lower the bar when we pack it and unpack it from the trailer. As you can see, all I'm doing is I'm just deforming these washers so they've got a bit of a U shape to them. That way they act as a locator. So, U-washer, flat washer, and a spring washer. Spring washer just helps so that it doesn't vibrate loose while we're pushing it around. And again, with grinders and Dremels, don't line yourself up with the disc. Always stand off to the side of the disc. That way you're never in danger of it coming apart towards you. Now, yes, I know I put the nut on before the black one, but all I was doing was tightening the other side down to make sure it was locked in place. Now I'll put the black one on this side. I'll screw down this nut, and then I'll screw down one on top of it to lock it in place, because I don't want to actually squeeze the two black bits together. I want them to be free to turn. As you can see, they are nylock nuts, and I'm using them as a lock nuts type. So tighten them to where the first one I would like it to be, so that the black threaded nut can be done up by hand so that it's not too tight. And then I'm just going to squeeze those two nuts together so they lock into place. And then I'll just clean up the end of that thread. As you can see, I can do them up and undo them by hand, so that's exactly what we wanted. Alright, 2 new bolts for the upper part of the bar. Like I said, these bolts and those other ones came undone, and this entire bar come apart while we were pushing it. A wheel fell off, and the exhaust. We had to do the maintenance. It was time. So yeah, all I'm doing here is putting them on, tightening them down. We'll cut off the excess and clean up the threads behind them. They got nylock, which is just a bit of plastic inside the nut, so they're not going to undo. They're not going to vibrate loose. And again, these sorts of things don't have to be overly tight. They just have to be firm. And I believe that's it for the mower. So what I'm going to do is these cables that I've just run, I'm going to run some zip ties along them just to hold them in place, so that, as you can see, they're a bit loose where they are. And I think that's what resulted in them catching on the mower, or the ride-on mower, and getting them chewed up. So we'll get some zip ties around them. Now, as you can see, I'm just making sure these zip ties don't actually clamp down on the inside of the inside cable. We don't want it being too tight for that cable. It'll actually start to damage the cable inside if we do that. So I'm actually using 2 zip ties in each location here. So one big one and one just between the bar and the cables, just to give it a separation. Check that everything works. And we've got no sticking. Put a little bit of fuel in it. And check the shift fires up. Spark plug's back on. Check the oil level. Yep. Give it a bit of a dust off. I'll clean it off in the morning before I test it properly. Shift fires up.